Base. Last month's meeting at Lee Hall Depot was fun. You guys were there? That was a blast. I enjoyed that very much. And we were surprised by how many showed up in the rain. It was terribly rainy, but that was really nice. Michael Moore surprised us. He would never say what his topic was. I guess he came up with it last minute or whatever. But it turned out to be a comprehensive rundown on the American Revolution and how it swept through Warwick County. And I thought that was terribly interesting. I really enjoyed his remarks on that. And just a few little items we're working on. The restoration of our office and our files, etc. in the 1810 courthouse, I must say, still a challenge over there. Still quite a bit of work to do. We're doing a little at a time. Sharon is there more than I am. Anyway, into all of that, we've thrown revamping of our computer systems over there. The Windows 10 stuff is going bye-bye, and we didn't want to do the past perfect software conversion that we're getting ready to do on old computers, and we have to redo them. So we have a new desktop, a new laptop, and a printer that I'm not tempted to throw through the window. So that's nice. The society did well on that. So we are headed towards converting all the stuff that Sharon has been working on. Sharon and I have been working on compiling all the archives, and we started on the hardest thing first. And there's thousands and thousands of pages that have been scanned and cataloged into the system. So, you know, old newspaper articles, every little paper that people had ever written, going back to the FEHA days, you know, we've had in our files for the longest time. But people really can't see it unless they want to go dig through our files, and they weren't very organized anyway. So, in the Past Perfect program, we'll be able to go to our website, put in your search stuff, and find what we have. But we haven't even got to the good stuff yet. We've still got good stuff to put into that Past Perfect program. And that's going to take a while, just the two of us doing it a couple days a week. It takes time to do all that. Anyway, I want to thank in absentia Ms. Dawn Worsham for her Matter of Grave Concern articles, including her latest contribution, which is on the front page of the newsletter here. I also wanted to mention that some kudos for me. That newsletter is a month early. I've been running as much as a year behind on it. So a month early, I guess. And then just as importantly, I want to thank our grand dame of Warwick County, Miss Gloria Rogers, for her account in Mulberry Island Notes of Sidnor Barksdale, what a name, in the lame pursuit of love during the wartime on Mulberry Island. They launched a reconnaissance mission to go see what Angelina Lee looked like. So that was it. Sitting around the campfire talking about the pretty girl. So anyway, our next luncheon I wanted to mention, we are back on the road. We are going to Lebanon Church, which is across from NB Plantation, for our June luncheon. Of course, Lebanon Church has a rich history in Old Warwick County, even being taken over by Union forces and converted to a stable to stable their horses. We will get the full historical treatment with Lebanon's pastor Dennis Worsham and Dawn, his wife. She says that we will meet in the multi-purpose fellowship room in the main newer part of the church, and then we will move over to the 1859 sanctuary afterwards for a history lesson. So looking forward to that. And so without further ado, is there any other business for the society? Anybody have anything for the society?
I have a question. I saw Alice Phillips' picture up there. Have we lost her? Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know either until recently.
When did that happen?
I think May 30th. Yeah, right at the end of May. She was 86 years old. Yeah. Sweet lady. There she is. 68.
It's my pleasure to introduce our secretary today, Ms. Wayne Jeffries. Probably know what she's doing. This must get batteries going.
Can you hear me now? He is a culinary historian and the author of Virginia Celebrates the Hospitality, History and Heritage of Virginia. This is a cookbook that she co-wrote with Rowena J. Fullenweiler. Does anybody ever go to Rowina's in Warwick? You remember the wonderful pound cake and the lemon curd and all that? That Rowena, yes. And James Andrew Crutchkin. She is also the author of Miss Daisy Celebrates Tennessee. And why did she write that? Because she's originally from Tennessee. She came to Virginia because of her husband's job, but also because of her passion for history and food. Lynette has previously served as the Director of Education at the Mariners Museum and also the
Hampton History.
Hampton History Museum, okay, and the former President's Park. Today, her topic is A Tempest in a Teapot. She will share the significance of tea in the American colonies and how it sparked a national revolution. So this is going to be a history lesson far beyond whatever you have learned in school about the Boston Tea Party. Because she's not only going to cover that very well-known infamous incident, but she will talk about lesser tea parties that were throughout the colonies. What were there, 17 or 18 of them? There were a lot, including some local ones. So be prepared to be surprised. There'll be some you're not familiar with. Now, as part of this special 250th Virginia event, we are going to enjoy a variety of teas today. And I noted there are teas back there for you to pour. Some of them are the teas that she specially prepares and curates, as well as some lesser teas and cupcakes. And I might mention that afterwards, she will have her teas for sale at $10 a box.
There's 12 for the teas, and I have some of my cookbooks because I was requested to bring them.
Yes, she will have her cookbook as well for available for sale and autograph if you would like to purchase that afterwards. So, check cash and Walmart, Square lottery tickets, and Square. Yeah, through the card. So, without any more ado, I introduce Lynette. We will have the batteries and the microphone eventually.
I'm glad to see all of you. I've met some of you in the past or seen you at gatherings. And I'll clarify, I did have the honor of being education and PR with the Hampton History Museum during its 400th. And I helped start the Coastal Museum with Alice and Dan. And my heart is aching missing Alice. I miss her very much. I'm honored to be here. I know that you all may know some of the things I'm going to share today, and that's great. You can probably accentuate and fill in some gaps. But there are some things about the Revolution and tea that go hand in hand other than the Boston Tea Party. So we're taking a look at the colonial times and how tea fit in. And when the settlers came, we'll start back. The Native Americans were here already. Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Okay, can you hear me now? Does this come out?
Yes.
Hold straight back.
Good. There we go.
Works very well.
A little more background on me. I came here, my husband was stationed at Langley. We have 5 children. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, but my heritage is here in the historic triangle. My mother's people came in 1610 on a ship called the Swan and arrived at Point Comfort and lived in Jamestown and Kecoughtan area when it became English occupied. And then on my dad's side, Sparkman, they arrived in Isle of Wight. They were on the roll at St. Luke's Church in 1632. But even prior to that, my dad's Vassar family, the Ballards, were here. And that's why Ballard Street's called Ballard. One of my guys laid out the town and named the longest street for himself, of course, you know. And also their land was sold for the site of the College of William and Mary. So one of my boys says, well, that means we should get to go there free. I'm going, no. don't talk that way. But it's a good try. So I feel like I am home. Names that I had always heard in my family tree, I knew were from Virginia. I just didn't know where, sitting in Tennessee. And when I moved out here and I taught school, and I started looking into things, and Alice helped me with a lot of my genealogy and determined, like, wow, you're related to a lot of folks. And so I just feel like I'm home wherever I go around our area. So let's look back to the days of the Native Americans taking roots and literally putting them in water and heating them for beverage. I guess you could say that was a type of tea, depending on what they used. And in 1602, we have a guy named Bartholomew Gosnold who traveled to the east coast of what would be the United States, and he landed in what is today Massachusetts. He stayed for 6 weeks, and he was looking for gold like the Spanish had found, but alas, he wasn't going to find that. But he did find sassafras and took a cargo back to England. They used sassafras bark as a tea in England, and so he loaded up and took some back. Some of his men did not want to stay as he wanted them to do, and he garnered faith that maybe he could bring more people back and start a settlement. And it took him a few years at Otley Hall in England to acquire enough support from the mayor of London, who was his wife's grandfather, and the Earl of many things, Earl of Southampton, Earl of Warwick, hello, there's our word, and then also he got Christopher Newport involved and other folks, so that the 3 ships, and I won't go into all that, you know all that, but the 3 ships arrived south side and later to what they call a point of comfort, to anchor, and met the Native Americans at Strawberry Banks, and excuse me, the rest, as they say, is history. But when they came, Gosnold had already been to America, and we kind of forget him in the midst of time because he is the one that gathered them all together. John Smith called him the mover and the shaker of Jamestown. But he got malaria about 4 months into the journey here ashore, and they had to bury him. His bones are usually, like Bill Kelso and I talked about it, 90% of the time his bones are on display at the Smithsonian now, when they're not at Jamestown. But he was truly one that wanted to bring a lot of people here. And at Jamestown, they had tea as it came on supply. And the tea, I'm skipping a lot, I'm just concentrating on tea. When Newport would come with supplies, he would round the bend at Point Hope, which is where the shipyard is, and people might see him coming and proclaim, news, news, Newport's got news, he's back. And that, along with the News Brothers, are our tales of how Newport News came to be, and it depends on which historian you're speaking with, which flavor of tale is accepted. But we like both of them, so it doesn't really matter. But as we had our colony established, the ladies at Jamestown did not have access to tea for a long while. And as we evolved into Middle Plantation on the peninsula and other satellite outings for settlement, then we started getting more supplies, and tea was more used in the home. And as we evolved even further with the city of Williamsburg, the port town of Yorktown, what would be Denby or Newport News, Warwick, then the average housewife, so to speak, eventually, at the time of the Revolution, would have more tea. And of course, that was before the taxation, when everyone said, wait a minute, we don't know that we want to pay that tax. And I know a lot of you are aware of that history, but to skirt over some of it, I will just say that it came down to the lady of the house, how much are they going to obey using tea or not, when people were saying, let's avoid it. And the ladies started going to the garden and to the cupboard and making their own brew. And that sufficed as a main way to avoid using tea to make a statement. The men, particularly the Sons of Liberty, were more evident in the news about how they didn't use tea, by dumping it, of course. And by the time we have Mount Vernon established, and Monticello, and all these lovely homes in Virginia, and including when George and Martha were President and First Lady living in New York City and then Philadelphia, tea was back in mode, I guess you could say, because they wanted it. They just liked it. And right now, tea is a hot button because we're on the doorstep of America 250. And tea is on people's minds, especially about the Boston Tea Party. And that's all well and good, but there were others. So we're going to explore a little bit about that. And I have to use notes on this to make sure I've got it straight because there were a lot of them. We're going to begin with going back to 1773. In your mind's eye, think of up and down the coast, the 13 colonies. And the first tea party on record was December 3rd, 1773, and it was not Boston. It was Charleston. Charleston actually had a tea party led by Christopher Gadsden and the Sons of Liberty of South Carolina. And they seized tea and placed it, they got it off of a ship and put it in the Exchange building there in downtown Charleston. I don't know if you've been to Charleston, but the Exchange building still stands. And it was a government building, and then everyone in South Carolina started boycotting tea. They did that as a demonstration. And then, just a few days later, on the 12th of December, Tea Party number 2. And that one is interesting because it took place in Lexington, Massachusetts, where the first shots of the war would be fired 2 years later. And citizens made a resolution publicly to avoid tea, and that they burned the tea in the town. The third tea party on record was the Boston Tea Party. And that one indeed was still in 1773, December 16th. And you know about that one. It was huge. It was a prearranged plan with Sons of Liberty dressing up and donning Native American disguises, or not so much a disguise, but to feign a disguise. And they dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. Now, when you do that, a lot of the tea was bohea, and it was packed hard like bricks. So when they dumped, it took them 3 hours to dump all that tea. Over 100 men ended up being involved. And they couldn't get it. It kept floating on the water. And they wanted to break up the bricks, so they got in small boats and took oars and banged them to get them to go down in the water. You know, that's a lot of things you don't read about in the history books, but that's what they had to do. It took them 3 hours, I guess, for the brewing of the harbor to be complete. And they had a resolution publicly also, and that was against consuming tea. And they also wanted to, when they counted up all the pounds of tea, it amounted to 92,000 pounds of tea. Today, that would be $1 million worth of tea in today's economy. So that was Boston, the one you read about or hear about, that Disney did a movie about Johnny Tremaine. If you've seen that, do you remember that old movie, Johnny Tremaine, that Disney did? I used to show it to my children on VHS. It's excellent, by the way. So that leads us also staying in 1773. And remember, these towns don't know that the others are doing it. There's no communication and no TV and all that, unless a horseback rider swiftly goes to tell someone. They have no idea another town, another colony has done this. So the fourth one would be good old Philadelphia. And Philadelphia was very nonviolent there, but the ship arrived in the harbor with what they called the hated tea. Was informed by the committee there that he would be tarred and feathered if he unloaded his tea. I think he took that to heart, and so he turned his ship around, and the largest shipment of tea to the colonies was never unloaded, and it was 697 chests of tea. That would have been huge. He got out of there. So that was Philadelphia's Tea Party on December 20, which leads us to Tea Party number 5. Tea Party number 5, Provincetown, Massachusetts. And it was the last day of 73. I guess they decided it would be a New Year's Eve surprise. And a Boston-bound ship had to run aground at Cape Cod. And local people seized the tea, took it to the fort at Castle Island. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but they went to Castle Island. And then the tea was supposed to be bought by a merchant in town. And when that was discovered, 7, quote, Mohawk Native Americans, unquote, but they weren't, arrived at his residence and took the chest from him and burned it. So that merchant was kind of brave or dumb, one or the other, however you're looking at it. So then we have the new year of 1774. Now, meanwhile, remember, the ladies are at home using parsley and cornflowers and other roots to try to make tea and still have tea. Some had tea that had been smuggled in, and they hid it and used some of it. But it was waning, and the men are going, we're still drinking the tea. The ladies are going, we're still trying to come up with our own brew. So here you are, 1774. Tea Party number 6, Princeton, New Jersey. And that was at the College of New Jersey, which is now called Princeton. The students did this one. The students broke into the college storeroom and got a big stash of tea. And then they gathered outdoors and made a big bonfire for the tea right on campus. And they really had a lot of spirited resolves that they wrote down. And they made an effigy of the governor of Massachusetts because he was pro-British. And that was not a good scene there at what would be Princeton. The next one would be April 22nd of 1774. And this will be number 7. In New York City, which technically, though, it was in Sandy Hook, New Jersey, because the ship was overcome at Sandy Hook, but it was bound for New York. Earlier, the ship Nancy had landed at Sandy Hook, 690 chests of tea. And the captain was advised to return to England or lose his life. Now, this captain was not as apt to follow orders, but he finally did because they held his crew hostage, number 1. And then they escorted him to New York City, where he agreed, okay, I'm going to leave. And he did. So that was one in New York. As a mate to that, just 4 days later, the ship called London arrived in the harbor at New York City. And this was considered an ongoing thing to not let the harbor at New York have tea. So the captain there claimed he had no idea he had tea on his ship. Yeah, right. And the Sons of Liberty learned that there were 18 chests of tea hidden down below. And then they also found out he was smuggling the tea into profit himself. So this was not a good day for him. He was seized, the ship was searched, and they dumped all of those tea chests into the Hudson River. The empty tea chests were then brought into downtown New York City, where they were used to ignite bonfires in the street at night. So that's what happened with that one. Official number 8 would be a second Boston Tea Party. Have you ever heard of a second Boston Tea Party? Okay, it was March 6th, and 60 men boarded a ship that came into the harbor, and they dumped 28 chests of tea there. The importing merchant had brought the tea, but he was not from the East India Company, hoping that they would just look the other way, because they were really after the East India Company on this. But no luck. They said tea is tea, and it's gone. So number 9. May 13th, Chestertown, Maryland. We're getting a little closer to home, aren't we? Chestertown, there were some folks, and there's not as much documentation. The reason we have documentation of this is because a pro-British citizen noted it and took the news to England that this happened in Chestertown. And also, there were resolves in Chestertown about opposition to taxes and, of course, importing tea. But the town has a tea party every year in Chestertown. And I don't know if you saw that show, what was it called, Chesapeake Shores? They actually showed one of the tea parties in Chestertown, a celebration of it on the show. Right? It's an annual event. They did dump tea into the Chester River. Now, number 10, Wilmington, North Carolina. Anyone from North Carolina? Or have folks there? Wilmington, of course, was a port city, and it is a place where the women took over on getting rid of tea. Not physically so much as in a solemn procession downtown. They brought no tea. And the details are sketchy, but it took place in March, and the place is not exactly known where they stopped the procession, but it was entirely led by women in the streets of Wilmington, which is nice that they were planning it and they went through with it. Eyewitnesses have written about it. So, tea party number 11. July of 1774, Charleston again has a second tea party. And it has imported tea seized from the ships, and the fate is unknown of where they dumped it, but they did dump it. And the captain claimed, "I didn't know I had tea aboard," one of those lines. That was getting old. And the mob threatened to tar and feather him. But he talked his way out of that situation. The 12th Tea Party is in Maine. Now, at this point in history, Maine is a part of Massachusetts. Okay, we look at a good map of the era. Maine was part of the colony of Massachusetts. So, York, Maine, had tea removed from a ship, and the Pickwacket Indians. I'm steady. I'm just going to be real still with it. They imitated Pickwacket Indians, which is the local tribe, They put 150 pounds of tea in the harbor there at York, Maine. Of course, Massachusetts officials were all up in arms over it because it was Massachusetts to them. Number 13, Annapolis, Maryland. They had a tea party on October 19th. And the imported tea came in on a ship called the Peggy Stewart. And the Peggy Stewart was found to have tea, and so a mob there in Annapolis took over, burned the tea. The 14th tea party. This one is in Edenton, North Carolina, not too far from here. This one's all women-led. Again, North Carolina women were really into it. This was the second tea party in North Carolina, and it was also led by women in the coastal town of Edenton on October 25th. And it involved no seizure, no destruction, but a lady named Penelope Barker wrote a document. 51 women signed it, and they sent it to the papers in London and to King George, making a proclamation affirming their resistance to tea and taxes. And their husbands didn't know they were doing this. They found out. Now, in London, a lot of the cartoonists in the news there made fun of these ladies, made them seem like they had not a lot of brilliance, and they did caricatures that were unbecoming, but it got the attention of people in England like, American women are not happy. So it was successful. Here is a piece of their publication. The provincial deputies of North Carolina, having resolved not to drink any more tea, nor wear any more British cloth, many ladies of this province have determined to give memorable proof of their patriotism and have accordingly entered into the following honorable and spirited association. I send it to you to show you fair countrywomen, meaning the English women, how zealously and faithfully American ladies follow the laudable example of their husbands, and what opposition your matchless ministers may expect to receive from a people thus firmly united against. That was part of the statement of the proclamation in Edenton. You can go to Edenton, not too far from here, a couple of hours. It's a quaint town on the Albemarle, I think, on the Sound. And they have the homes where these ladies met, and you can tour them. And of course they serve tea. They have tea rooms there, and it's very nice, very quaint. And remembering the ladies, like Abigail Adams always said, remember the ladies, and North Carolina is very well represented by those 52 ladies, well, 51. There's another one they think that couldn't get there to sign. So, that was number 15. Who do you think is Sweet 16 on this list? Yorktown, Virginia. Our own Thomas Nelson. He would lead the Tea Party on November 7th of 1774. Townspeople seized chests. There weren't a lot. There were only 2. And the Virginia Gazette of Williamsburg reported, "We will never submit to any measure that may in the least endanger our liberties, which we are determined to defend at the risk of our lives." And they threw that tea overboard in the York River. And Yorktown has been reenacting this, and shall again this year, but last year was the 250th year anniversary, and they had a big to-do. Yorktown also has what's called the Yorktown Tea Party. This will be the 3rd annual one this year. They always do it the week of the reenactment. So this year it's on November 7th, if you're interested in coming. And it's an all-day affair with keynote speakers, workshops, hands-on. You get to make your own tea blends, take them home. There will be a Virginia First Lady reenactment having tea that day with the participants. It's all very nice, and I think it's $25 for the whole day, and you do get some goodies and, of course, tea. They have a la carte lunch. The reason I know this, I'm on the committee. They have a la carte lunch from Carrot Tree available that day. And it's held at the American Revolution Museum, and your ticket includes touring the museum. So it's a pretty good deal for $25. So just know about that. I can make sure Mary has all the particulars closer to the date if you all want to go. Good little field trip. So the last tea party documented, number 17, Greenwich, New Jersey, December 22nd. A ship of tea destined for Philadelphia, ironically, had smuggled tea in it, but locals found it, seized it, burned it on the town square. So one of these things you need to remember, and I'm sure there were more, but we don't have documentation brought to light. 17 tea parties, and I think Charleston wins with 3 and the first one, which kind of irritates them because the history books push how Boston did it. Charleston saying, we started it and did it 3 times, but that's how it is with publications. The term tea party didn't come about until 50 years later when people in our country were reflecting on the 50th anniversary of July 4th and thinking of the tea parties and started coining the phrase tea party. Which leads me to talking to you about how in the homes was the individual family's tea party or the lady of the house. How would she associate with tea? And when I did research for my cookbook, which represented the 400th of Virginia, it's called Celebrate Virginia, and I researched recipes from every county. I also had a lot of recipes from the historic sites of our Commonwealth, and also there's a lot of county histories in here, and Newport News has one of the most famous recipes in this book. It is Anderson's chicken salad. How many of you had that at Anderson's? It's excellent. And I talked them into giving me that recipe, and you wouldn't believe how many Air Force officers' wives from different bases ordered the book just to get Anderson's chicken salad that they remembered when they were stationed at Langley. So another really good recipe from Newport News is one that I found from the 350th of Virginia. And it was a Newport News hospital cafeteria recipe. The hospital doesn't even exist anymore. I thought it was public domain, and I put it in the book. Fried strawberries. And you think, I've never heard of that. It's a Newport News delicacy. And what you do is you fry your strawberries in a little oil of choice and get them out on a paper towel and drain them well and roll them in powdered sugar, and you've got a nice little treat of fried strawberries. That was in that hospital cookbook for Newport News. But there are many other recipes and from historic sites here in Newport News in that book. And I did bring a few of them because I was asked to if you want one of those cookbooks. However, now when I look at doing more cookbooks, because I did one for Tennessee also for the 200th of Tennessee. Tennessee's just a baby compared to Virginia. Instead of writing cookbooks right now, I decided to put culinary history on the back of tea. And I started this little tea business about 1.5 years ago, and it has taken off. I did it to have history. I call it History to a Tea. And I started with Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown, and came up with historic triangle teas. And there's a connector somehow with culinary history written on the back. And the one that I have up and down the coast is Colonial Lady. And indeed, it's the only loose tea I've done because they didn't have these pre-made tea bags then. So I'm just going to pass this around so you can smell it's good enough to be a potpourri, okay? But it is Colonial Lady loose tea, and it has the cornflower and the parsley and the rose hips and a lot of flowers and things that the women would have gotten out of the garden. So it's a salute to the ladies, Colonial Lady. I have Colonial Gent coming out soon. We'll do the history of the Earl of Grey. Who's he? Why do we have a tea name for him? But not to get ahead of myself, I brought some attributes here to show you what an average Colonial Lady's repertoire at home might be. And of course, beeswax candles, homemade breads, also homemade soaps. But when it came to tea, it would be the blends from her garden and cupboard. And that is represented by what I'm passing around. But she would also have many attributes, even still the sassafras root, especially in New England. And also, real pretty teapots, which eventually they would buy from merchants in England again, and have them in the stores of Williamsburg, Duke of Gloucester Street, whatever. But when we think back to these ladies, we think of some of the famous ladies because we want to know more, okay? So let me briefly, because I could talk all day to you guys. And I did bring some handouts, okay? I wanted you to see, what some of our Virginia colonial ladies actually look like. And I think, now remember Martha, of course, was younger at one time and very striking. This book salutes First Ladies, and she's older, and we still think she's striking because she's on Martha Washington. And when she had her tea, she liked to put crushed cocoa bean shells in her drink at home. It was not exactly a sweet chocolate, it was kind of bitter to line her tea. That's how Martha liked her tea. Can you all see well enough? George, on the other hand, had bohea or even green tea, and he had 3 cups of tea every morning, not coffee. George Washington loved tea every morning. And if it was too hot, he poured it in his saucer and drank out of the saucer. Because that's what gentlemen did back then. I'm going to show you Abigail Adams. Abigail loved, and remember, she was at home in Quincy, Massachusetts, with John gone most of the time with all the Continental Congress meetings. And she had a large brood of children, but she had time for tea, and she put rose petals in her tea. That was her favorite. So you can think of Abigail that way. And then, of course, Thomas Jefferson's wife, we do not have an image, but they say his daughter favored her mother quite a bit. So there's a picture of Martha Washington Jefferson Randolph, who acted as First Lady on behalf of Thomas Jefferson. And I have not found note of what exact tea she liked, but we do know about her dad. He liked a bohea as well, but he also liked jasmine sometimes in his tea. In fact, he grew jasmine at Monticello. 2 different types. Dolly Madison, our hostess with the mostest. Dolly, her recipes were burned in the White House by the British, but a few of her recipes remained in Philadelphia when she was married the first time. We can get a few of her recipes. What we do know is she loved also roses and had it very glamorous menus, especially when Lafayette came on his return visit to America, and they hosted him. But tea was always aha. Elizabeth Monroe, you probably haven't seen images of her often. Elizabeth Courtwright Monroe. When she and Little Jemmy, she called James Madison Little Jemmy, Jemmy, because I think she was taller. She called him that, and she loved a syrup of roses. In fact, I've got that as a recipe for you all, because you can put it in cookies, you can put it in tea, but it's a syrup of roses. And you can put it in syllabub, whatever. Elizabeth, I have to relate very quickly. When they were in France, when he was ambassador for George Washington, Lady Lafayette was in prison then, Adrienne, and that would be Lafayette's wife. She went to visit Madame Lafayette in prison, and this was going to be a political scandal if those in charge at the time in France didn't release Lafayette's wife. It would be an international deal. So because of her visit, her bravery to go to the prison as an ambassador's wife, they released Madame Lafayette and her 2 daughters from prison. I just wanted to share that. And then one more I'll show you. Louisa Adams. She always had the perfect tea. She was British. Abigail wasn't fond of the fact that John Quincy married a British citizen. And so it was a kind of rocky beginning in the family, okay? However, Louisa, she kept having her proper English teas, and eventually in the White House did the same. I just think it's very interesting sometimes to see their faces and up close and know what they really look like. But this is a vintage book, and if you ever find it, it's great for you, for your family, for your grandkids. There's one on the presidents as well. I taught school 21 years, and I used this book a lot through the years, and now I think, well, these are good paintings of these ladies. Let me share it. I also have a couple of copies today if you're interested of this really great book. I did not write it, but I'm a fan of Pearl Dexter, so I do carry her books. And it's called Tea with Presidential Families. And it's really good, and it goes through the administration of Clinton. It's very well received. So one other thing I wanted to share with you that's not about tea. 5 years ago, my youngest son took me to Europe as a gift. We were there for 18 days. Mommy, I'll take you wherever you want to go. Wow. Well, I wanted to go to the English countryside and see villages. I didn't have to see the big everything. We did go to Buckingham Palace. We did go to France a couple of nights, and we went to Scotland a couple of nights. But most of my time was spent in the places where my heritage were in England. And so we went to Warwickshire. And I always think of here, Warwick. So Trey and I walked into the Warwickshire Historical Society and joined for £5 that day. And I have their brochure. They're your counterpart in England. And I told them about this organization. I told them, I'm getting chills, I told them about Warwick County, that it still lives. And they related, and also I've had others relate to me in Jamestown. It's possible, not proven, that my ancestor was the first one from Warwick that came to the area and that he coined the phrase for Warwick County. Now his name was Thomas Bolden. He was on my mother's side, Bolden. They spelled it B-O-U-L-D-I-N-G-E, and it shortened to Bolden later. And he and his wife Mary came in August of 1610 on a ship called the Swan, and they settled later at Strawberry Banks and Kecoughtan, but they lived in Jonestown first. They were the only ones on record around that were noted as being from Warwickshire. So I asked them, which town? They said, oh, we know. We've got him right here. He's from Barford. Barford was like 7 miles away. And his father was born in Sherborne, which was another mile. All of these places are like 10 miles northeast of Stratford-upon-Avon, which is where Shakespeare was from.
That's right.
Where we were going to stay for 5 nights because that's where Mommy wanted to stay. And my great-great-great-great-grandparents had married in the Holy Trinity Church there in Stratford. And I went in and I asked them there, and they said, well, Shakespeare was a kid. He was probably at the wedding. His parents would have gone and they would have taken him. It's very possible he was at the wedding when folks got married, you know. All of this was just mind-boggling to me. But we went to Barford, a little chapel. Of course, most of the churches there are shaped like a cross, like our early churches are here. And they had a little twig tree in there that they had taken branches and spray painted it white, had it in a vase in the church, and they had a basket of pastel ribbons. And I said, what is that for? They said, that's our prayer tree. We do that here in Barford. You tie a ribbon on the tree and say a prayer. So it was very touching to go to Barford and see where my mother's people had come from. And then we went past Sherborne also. But Warwickshire is gorgeous. And I got to know several people in Stratford because I was there long enough. And the bed and breakfast we stayed in, the lady there said, well, tell me more about Warwick in Virginia. You know. So I got out the map and made sure she could see Newport News and about Warwickshire here, Warwick here. And they were fascinated. They were fascinated to know that the name carried into America and was still embraced. So I have their brochure here with info and website, and I got a book that day called Warwickshire Countryside. And it is lovely to describe the land. So what I might do with Mary is give her info on it with a website so you all can look it up. If you want to go online and read about it or talk to them, you'll have access. I think it's so important, the connectors with Mother Country and us, with the names being the same. And also it's just as important with the unknown, like the Native Americans, their heritage, how the tribes may have blended or visited. And when I taught school in Hampton, I was at the Mary Peak Gifted Center. And all I taught was Virginia Studies, 4th grade. Everyone's homeroom would come to me for that. That was my specialty. And I had a lot of African American children in my class who could not trace their trees back. Because we were studying genealogy. Like I said, I knew Alice and she gave me some forms for the kids. And what we did was discover that there is a way for saliva tests to show what part of Africa your heritage may associate with. And so we did that, and I had so many parents really get involved in it for the kids. If you can take your family tree back at least 3 generations, you're masterful, because sometimes you can't find all that. But if you have access, you all, I'm just preaching to the choir, you all know how important that can be. And the mainstay of why I got so involved with genealogy and history, my great-grandmother on my mom's side, I was 17 when I lost her, but she used to tell me the tales And she included them of the Boldens, because that was her maiden name when she married. And she told me about the Swan. And at first, sometimes I thought, are they really sure that they were that early, even before the Pilgrims? But they were. And now I've verified it. But as a kid in high school, I was taking a lot of notes, and then I'd go talk to my dad's family, my grandfather, and find out more about the Ballards and the Parkers and people. And all of it pointed to Virginia. So I am home. And it's wonderful to meet all of you. And I did not come here to peddle my wares, but I've been asked to bring some things that people are interested. And I did bring a few things, but the teas I have today, because I didn't bring many, if you're interested in my teas, in fact, there's some I put back there as samples for you to take. Williamsburg Summer is the one I have out right now, and it is a blackberry. I have a few Williamsburg Spring, which is honey almond. And I have a few Colonial Courtship, which is the history of Thomas Jefferson meeting his wife on the back. And it is a chocolate-covered strawberry in a cup. So I do a lot of holiday teas, and they are widely accepted. Anderson's is going to start carrying my teas. Certain ones, not all of them. The Peanut Shop carries a bunch. They have a whole wall of my teas. And they even include the Christmas ones year-round because they say, Winnet, a lot of people make a lifetime one pilgrimage to the historic triangle, and they want to buy keepsakes to take home, and they're glad if it's a holiday one because they'll have it as a reminder when the holidays roll around. So they do keep a lot of my holiday teas out. Anderson's is going to carry my autumn pumpkin spice and holiday teas as well. But I'm thinking about doing a tea called Newport News Noel. And I'm trying to see if Anderson's would carry it if I make it. And put a little history of Newport News and Warwick Christmases on the back. Maybe even a little recipe or something. Maybe fried strawberries. But just to have inclination that Newport News would have its own. The reason I'm thinking of doing that is because Our White just did one for daffodils. That Our White has done two. Gloucester did Gloucester Gold tea. Our White's done holiday ham tea. It does not taste like ham, but it's good with the ham. And Smitty Pig strawberry. But I'm finding with my Jamestown gingerbread, my Yorktown Yuletide, which is a Yule log tea. It's chocolate and toffee. It's really good. I think Newport News needs something to represent Newport News. So Anderson's will be carrying some things. I usually don't do retail, okay? I'm a wholesaler with my wares. But when I talk like this and I'm asked to bring some things, I will do some at a discount, especially with you guys as a nonprofit. So anyway, I hope that you have your tea all through the 250. And remember, the 250 is not just next year, because especially over in Yorktown, it's going to go on quite a while, because it's a while to the end of the war. And so right now we're in the prelude and on the doorstep of America 250. Just remember all the tea parties. Remember the ladies with their tea, and with Bartholomew Gosnell, who has a building named for him at CNU here in town. He needs a marker. I'm working on that.
You got a whole clock in here from called Gosnell Whole Clock.
Oh yeah, Gosnell, that is true. When I was with Hampton, Gosnell's Hope Park, and Pocosin looks at that whole area also. There's 20 islands in Pocosin, and Captain John Smith chartered all of those on a map. Now here's the mystery, and I brought this up to Bill Kelso. The islands of Pocosin, which lean into Hampton, was called Gosnell's Bay. And that, a bay back then was more than what we think of as a bay. It was It was a term that embraced an area's name. And so yes, the hope in that case was very old English word for bay. That's why it's Gosnell's hope. And I think we don't have proof that Gosnell went around Poquoson Islands and did all that, but we think he did because they stayed at Point Comfort and visited with the Kickotan for 3 days before they went up the James to find the island they were going to settle on. I can't see Gosnell, a mariner, a graduate of Oxford, sitting there twiddling his thumbs, not getting in that little shallop and exploring a little bit. I can just see him going on up in the day. And I can see John Smith knowing he did it, and after Gosnell died, honoring him with calling it Gosnell's Bay. But that is just a premise. But I could see that happening because Smith called him the mover and the shaker of the settlement. None of them would have been together if it hadn't been for Gosnell. And you say, well, why wasn't he proclaimed the admiral? He knew Newport could do it, had the reputation, and also money backing him. Gosnell was the captain of the middle ship. But he was the leader who got them together. So it's been an honor to be with you all, and happy America 250. Yes.
Didn't Gosnell host the Jamestown excursion? And isn't that story told on the Chesapeake Bay Walk, which is the Wilkes section of Hampton, that walking tour from, what is it, Kickotan Road runs like the 7-Eleven here. Little Cell runs that.
Yes.
And then that walking tour actually goes to Newport News, where the Newport News and Hampton line meets on Perry Avenue.
Right.
So that story is actually on those little marquees on the walkway.
Right, a lot of it is. And some people even call the Newport News part, by mistake, they call it Kickotan, which it wasn't. Kickotan, as you know, was near the VA.
That's right.
Yes, Gosnell is getting some more recognition than he used to because of things like that are pointed out about him. I have talked to Mariners Museum and asked them if we could get a grant between England, Otley Hall, and Massachusetts for the 1602 journey, and Virginia to do a traveling exhibit on Gosnell and let mariners initiate it. That's something I would
Can I
like.
ask one more question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you working with the Sister Center program that's up at the City Center?
No, not particularly, but I am retired from Colonial Williamsburg. I used to be the person for 10 years that CW sent across the nation to represent them for education. And I would go to social studies conferences and travel trade shows and homeschool conferences. And I was the face of Colonial Williamsburg. And I wrote grants. I was not in development, but I did write a major grant with Ferguson that underwrote all fourth graders coming free to Colonial Williamsburg, 21 counties. And Ferguson gave $1 million for that. So I did instigate that. So my forte was, let's get the kids here. And also now I volunteer for different organizations to help them with projects. But I speak, I write, and then I play with my grandchildren.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I'm asking all the questions. Can you tell me what it's, because you say you do the Williamsburg stuff, and you say you are familiar with the Smith Dairy Farm?
Yes.
And they call you sometime to do some type of...
When they need a step on
Yes,
God, I'm one that they might call.
What
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
tell when you go to the Smith Dairy Farm? What is that story? Because it's hard, because you got the Lightfoot Solomon Mishaw story, you got the Smith Dairy Farm story, you got the Okie story.
Well, they don't really have me do the tours there. They need step-on help for Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown, and they sometimes, or will interact at Old Chickahominy House with the group for a few minutes or something like that. I have not done a tour of the Smith Farm. They do that themselves because they live it. But I have befriended them for years. I used to do the fam tours for Williamsburg Chamber, and I always had Olita do it and would ride with them to visit and do that and initiate a lot of conversation about the farm. It's wonderful, and a lot of people drive down the parkway and don't realize the heritage of the Smith Farm just right there when they pass it by. They just think it's some other farm. It's not just some other farm. It's wonderful. Any other questions?
You were part of the African American community during this time?
Later, not initially. Initially, there's no record that I know of where tea was part of their diet or to purchase it for the diet. In time, it would be, but at the time of the Revolution, no, not that I know of. But that's a good question. Anything? Yes, sir.
You referenced coffee versus tea.
Mhm.
Did they drink coffee too?
A little. Here's the thing. The number one beverage in the world is water. The number two beverage in the world is tea. Number three beverage in the world is coffee. So it kind of answers itself, and that's worldwide. Tea is even more, like I say, a hot button right now. But, and even decaf is because of health. That's why I do a decaf pumpkin spice. How many times do you see a decaf pumpkin spice? You don't see it that much. For health reasons. And also, it's not a new thing that tea is more popular. I think here in America, coffee has a strong presence, of course. And in some areas it may beat tea. And in your daily life it might beat tea. But worldwide, from things I have seen, projections, tea is the second most favorite beverage in the world.
I drink iced tea.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, you know, oh, that's one other thing I was going to show you. And I don't work for them, I don't promote them. I don't want you to know about them. There's one tea plantation in America in Charleston called Charleston Tea Plantation on Wadmalaw Island. And it does have a Virginia connection. Now, this tea is hard to find around here, but Old Chickahominy House in Williamsburg carries it. The tea is grown here. Now, Mississippi's got a little plantation, Hawaii, a little plantation. Years ago, Thomas J. Lipton, here I go again. I hope I can have 3 more minutes. Thomas J. Lipton came here from Scotland. And he worked on a tobacco farm in Suffolk. And he got very ill there, and the family was very good and took care of him. And then he bought some land in Suffolk. Well, he tried to grow tea in Suffolk. But we don't have the climate or soil conducive for tea around here. He went to South Carolina. Found that island. He found a town called Somerville, which claims to be the home of sweet iced tea. But he grew tea, but he went back to Scotland then to help take over the stores his parents had. And he got into building yachts, and he was distracted. But he still owned the land in Suffolk. Today, that land is the site of Lipton Tea because of Thomas J. Lipton. And they make all of the tea bags for Lipton are made in Suffolk and bag the tea in Suffolk. So that's a little Virginia connection to that. But Wadmalaw, down in the south part of Charleston, St. John's Island, The Bigelow Company has now bought that, and Bigelow is saving it historically, which is good. And so, but that is an American story connected to Virginia, so I wanted to share that with you. I think when we look at tea, like right now, most of it is from Asia or India, the different blends. The blends I have, I customize for different entities. My manufacturers in Baltimore, they've been in business since 1895, and their mainstay is coffee, also tea, and also hot chocolate. And I've worked with them, and they give good prices for my folks because they love history. The owner says, my family's always just dedicated. So it's a good community, the tea community overall here in the States. But when I was in England, I enjoyed their take on everything too, more formal perhaps, but they embraced the tea. Anything else? Yes.
I'm from up north, and I remember reading the history books about the Boston Tea Party,
Yeah.
just the one major big one.
Right.
And I'm 75 years old, and I don't remember what I learned then. And can you elaborate in 2 or 3 paragraphs what exactly happened at the Boston Tea Party? What was historically considered?
At the Boston Tea Party?
Yeah.
Well, I did touch on it a little
Yeah.
earlier because I had so much to cover. But about 100 men dressed up as Mohawk Indians, the Sons of Liberty.
What?
The Sons of Liberty, which gathered together in Boston, and they had a liberty tree where they would meet, and they planned to go on the ship and push all the tea in the water because they were retaliating with the taxes on the tea.
No taxation.
Yes, exactly. No taxation without representation.
The tea came from England?
Yes.
And they
They took over the ship and threw it in the water. That's the one where they got it and had to get the oars and push it on down. That was Boston, yes. And that one, and remember this, folks, most of your history books are written by New England authors and printed by New England publishers. You're not going to find much on Virginia in there. And I'm not being ugly, I'm just being observant. You're going to have a paragraph saying Captain John Smith knew Pocahontas, the picture. But you're going to have a ton about Plymouth, okay? Not knocking Plymouth, I've been there, it's great. In fact, I feel sorry for them because during their 400th, COVID was going on and it didn't get attendance like it would have if COVID had not been going on. But yeah, Boston, of course, a premier tea party. But I just wanted you all to know about the other 16, including our own down the road. Good question, actually. All right, thank you, folks. If you do want to purchase something, the teas are $12, my cookbooks are $25, and that's tax inclusive, okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Back to those chests and the Boston Tea Party. So about how much would a chest of tea have weighed? I think you told us earlier. And so it's really packed in their tub that you kind of
Oh,
let the
yeah,
dogs
it's
in.
bricks.
And so why don't they just toss the whole chest in there? Or the chest
Oh, they wanted to make a statement and have the tea not be obtainable in any way and mix it in the harbor, let the Atlantic blend with it. Yeah, they wanted to really get rid of it.
tested, be the first to fail? Will you, the people of York and of Gloucester, Virginians, will you defend the rights of all America? Well then, come with me.
To the ship! To the ship!
And the delegation of Committee of Safety, please follow Mr. Thomas Nelson Jr.
No, I didn't think about it, but they shut off the canning yesterday.
Shoulder, cross. Order, parallax. That's the squad. Dismiss.